Hello, I bring you my family revenge, which is called, "You're not family anymore," my cousin said at the funeral, so I'll rewrite it the next morning. I never thought I'd hear those words at my own grandmother's funeral, but there I was, dressed in black, holding a damp tissue, when my cousin Madison approached me with that fake smile I knew so well from childhood. What she said next would change everything between us forever. And what did I do the next morning? Well, that's a story you need to hear until the end. It was a typical October day in Portland, Oregon. The golden leaves were falling softly as dozens of people gathered in the chapel to say goodbye to the matriarch of our family, Grandma Charlotte. She had been so much more than a grandmother to me. She had been my mother, my rock, my best friend. When my parents died in a car accident when I was only 12 years old, she was the one who took me in, raised me, and gave me all the love an orphaned child could need. For years, our home had been a hub for family gatherings. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, they all happened in Grandma Charlotte's blue Victorian, her kitchen always smelling of apple pie and fresh coffee. I helped prepare meals, set the table, and gradually became the unofficial hostess of all family events. It was only natural, after all. I lived there. I knew every nook and cranny of the house. I knew exactly how Grandma liked things to be organized. But not everyone in the family was happy about it. My Uncle Michael's daughter, Madison, had always been barely jealous of my proximity to Grandma. She lived only 15 minutes away, but her visits were sporadic and always accompanied by elaborate excuses about how busy she was with work, her kids, her husband. In fact, Madison only came by when she needed something, to borrow money, to have someone babysit her kids, or when there were rumors about Grandma's will being changed. The tension between us had been growing in recent months. Grandma Charlotte was becoming frailer, and I became her primary caregiver. I drove her to doctor's appointments, helped with her medications, shopped for groceries, cooked her favorite meals. It was a labor of love, but it was also work. I cut back on my hours at the accounting firm where I worked, so I could be more present. My social life all but disappeared. My romantic relationships didn't last long because I always put Grandma first. But I didn't care. She had done the same for me when I was a child and needed her. It was my turn to repay her. During this time, I noticed that Madison had started to come by more often, not to help, but to check in on how things were going. She would come in with pastries from the bakery, feigning interest in Grandma's stories, but I could see her watching everything with a calculating eye. I noticed how she examined the antique furniture, how she asked questions about important documents, how she would casually mention how much real estate in Portland had appreciated. The final straw was when I found out that she had tried to convince Grandma to move into a nursing home. "It would be better for everyone," she would say. "Jessica works so hard, she deserves to have her own life. And you would get professional care." What she didn't say was that a nursing home would cost a fortune and would quickly eat up Grandma's life savings. Grandma Charlotte was a smart woman, and she saw through the real intentions behind this suggestion. One evening, as we sat drinking tea in the kitchen, she took my hand and said, "Jessica, darling, you know you're the daughter I never had, don't you? You're my real family." These words echoed in my mind throughout the funeral. As the minister spoke about Grandma's extraordinary life, her generosity and love for her family, I could barely concentrate. My heart was broken, but it was also filled with gratitude for having had so many wonderful years with her. It was during the intermission between the service and the burial that Madison approached. She had spent the morning receiving condolences as if she were the chief mourner, telling stories about her special closeness to Grandma to people who knew all too well what the truth was. "Jessica," she said, touching my arm with mock familiarity, "we need to talk about the house arrangements. Now that Grandma is gone, you're going to need to find a place to live, aren't you?" I looked at her in confusion. "What are you talking about, Madison?" "Well, you know the house is going to be sold. We're going to divide everything equally among the grandchildren, as is the family tradition. I'm sure you understand." My stomach sank. "Madison, Grandma made it very clear in her will. She showed me the documents a few months ago." Her smile grew colder. "Oh, honey, you're confused. You're not really part of the family, are you? I mean, you were informally adopted, but there were never any legal papers." My dad already talked to the lawyer. You have no legal right to anything. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. Around us, other family members were chatting in small groups, oblivious to the bomb that was going off right there. You can't be serious, I muttered. Look, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. You're not technically part of the family anymore. You never were, really. But don't worry, we'll let you stay in the house for a few weeks until you find an apartment. We're understanding people. At that moment, I felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. All the pain of losing Grandma mixed with an anger I had never felt before. How dare she say that at the funeral? How dare she question my place in the family after everything I had done? But then I remembered something very important. 3 months earlier, when Grandma's health had begun to decline more rapidly, she had called me in for a serious talk. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she said, "Jessica, honey, there's something I need to tell you, something that may be important in the future." She explained that years ago, when it became clear that she would be raising me permanently, she had consulted a lawyer about legal adoption. She had discovered that due to my age at the time and some bureaucratic complications, it would be easier to officially include me in the will as the primary heir. She had done just that, updating all the legal documents to ensure that I had the same rights as any biological child would have. "But Jessica," she had said, "I want you to know that there is a special clause in the will. If any family member contests your inheritance or tries to prove that you are not part of this family, you will automatically lose any right to the inheritance. It is my way of protecting you and ensuring that my wishes are respected." At the time, I thought it was an unnecessary precaution. I never imagined that I would need this protection. But then, listening to Madison's cruel words at my grandmother's funeral, I knew that Grandma Charlotte had been wiser than I had imagined. She knew her family better than I had thought. I didn't say anything to Madison at that moment. I simply looked her in the eye and said, "We'll see." Then I walked away to join the others who were heading to the cemetery. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The burial, the reception at the church, the awkward conversations with relatives who clearly knew about the situation but didn't know how to react. Madison spent the entire time whispering to her father, Uncle Michael, and a few other close relatives. Occasionally, they would glance my way with expressions that ranged from pity to embarrassment. When I finally got home, to the house that had been my home for over 15 years, I sat in the kitchen where I had shared thousands of meals with Grandma. Everything still smelled like her. Her personality still permeated every corner. And now Madison wanted to take me away like I was a stranger. That night, I could barely sleep. I kept thinking about all the memories, all the special moments, how Grandma had always made me feel like I belonged there. I remembered her words about the will and the special clause. A small flame of hope began to grow in my chest. The next morning, I called the office of Mr. Thompson, the family's attorney for over 30 years. I explained the situation and set up a meeting for the same day. He seemed surprised by what I had told him about my conversation with Madison, but he didn't seem concerned. "Jessica," he said when I met him in his office, "I think there are a few things you need to know about your grandmother's will, and a few things your cousin Madison needs to know too." He opened a thick folder and began to explain. Grandma Charlotte's will was much more complex and detailed than I had imagined. Yes, I was the primary heir to the house and most of the estate, but there were also specific provisions for other family members, including a sizable fund for Madison's children's education. The most interesting provision, however, was the one Grandma had mentioned. Any heir who challenged my legitimacy as a family member or tried to exclude me from the inheritance would automatically forfeit all rights. Not only that, but her inheritance would be redistributed to charities that helped orphaned children. Your grandmother was a very smart woman, Jessica. She knew exactly how to protect you and your will, Mr. Thompson said. But there was more. He showed me a document I had never seen before, legal adoption papers that had been processed when I was 13. Apparently, Grandma had lied about the bureaucratic hassle. She had legally adopted me, but she chose not to tell me at the time so as not to pressure me or make me feel different. I had been, legally, her adopted daughter for over a decade. That means that even without the will, you would have inheritance rights like any biological child, the lawyer explained. I felt a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, but also a deep sadness that I had only discovered this after she was gone. She had protected me in ways I had never imagined. What happens now? I asked. Well, officially, the will be read to the entire family next week. But given what you told me about your conversation with your cousin, I think we should speed up the process. I'll call all the heirs today and schedule the reading for tomorrow. The next morning, the entire family gathered in Mr. Thompson's office. Madison arrived with Uncle Michael and a few other relatives, all with confident expressions. Clearly, they thought they knew exactly how things would play out. Mr. Thompson began to read the will in a solemn and official manner. When he got to the part about my main inheritance, I saw Madison's face go pale. When he read the clause about disenfranchisement for anyone who contested my legitimacy, she was visibly shaken. "But that can't be right," she interrupted. "She's not really family. She was never legally adopted." Mr. Thompson stopped reading and looked at her with a serious expression. "Ms. Madison, I need to inform you that Jessica was legally adopted by your grandmother over 10 years ago. I have all the documents that prove it." The silence in the room was deafening. Madison looked at her father, who looked equally shocked. Clearly, they had based their entire plan on incorrect information. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "I must inform you that by publicly questioning Jessica's legitimacy as a member of the family, as reported by her and confirmed by several witnesses present at the funeral, you have activated the exclusion clause mentioned in the will. Therefore, you and anyone who supported her in this dispute have automatically forfeited your inheritance rights." What followed was chaos. Madison began to scream. Uncle Michael tried to argue that it had been a misunderstanding. Other relatives tried to quickly distance themselves from the accusations. But Mr. Thompson was adamant. The words had been said, the witnesses existed, and the deceased's wishes would be respected. In the days that followed, the news spread like wildfire through the family. Some relatives supported me, acknowledging that I had been the only one who had truly cared for Grandma in her last years. Others sided with Madison, claiming that the whole situation was unfair. But I knew the truth. Grandma Charlotte had foreseen this. She knew her family members better than they knew themselves. She knew that some would show their true colors after her death, and she wanted to protect me from that cruelty. Today, I still live in the blue Victorian house that was my home for so many years. I have converted one of the bedrooms into an office where I work with my accounting clients. The kitchen still smells of coffee and apple pie. I learned all of Grandma's recipes. And on Thursday nights, I open the house to a support group for orphaned children, something I know she would approve of. Madison has tried to contact me a few times, claiming that it was a misunderstanding, that she was emotionally shaken by the funeral. But some words can't be undone. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. She showed her true colors when it mattered most. The irony is that if she had simply stood by me and respected my grief, she would have inherited a sizable inheritance. Her children's education fund alone was worth over $100,000. Now, that money is going to help children who really need it. Sometimes when I sit on the porch watching the sunset, I can almost hear Grandma laughing. She always said that life had a funny way of revealing people's true characters, and that in the end, true love always triumphs over greed. "You're not family anymore," Madison had said, but she was wrong. I had always been family, not by blood, but by choice. True family is not defined by DNA, but by who is there for you in the moments that matter most. And when it came time to prove who really cared about Grandma Charlotte, it became very clear who was real family and who was just interested in the inheritance. In the end, Grandma had the last word, and I couldn't be more grateful for her wisdom, her love, and her ability to protect me even after she was gone. She may have left us physically, but her love and protection remain with me every day. This is my story. The story of how I discovered that true love builds bridges stronger than any legal document, and how the wisdom of a loving grandmother can protect even beyond death. Madison thought she could cut me out of the family, but she ended up cutting herself out. And me? I stayed where I always belonged, at home. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Leave your opinion in the comments. I'll be here, and see you next time.